Hi guys, Aceface back with another Tyranid content video for you today. And this is the third part in my kind of breakdown of the Tyranid Codex. Now, you know, it's an old book, but we're going through it with a bit of a 9th edition hat on, get it? And breaking down what I think is useful, how you would use it, and kind of going into a little bit of detail about the units. We're not going into huge detail, but we're going to cover every unit in the book, and we'll honourable mention a few Forge World units, particularly in this particular section, because it is the heavy support. And we'll also cover the troop transports and fortifications, because that's pretty quick as well, and flyers in this section. So let's start the ball rolling. And if you do want to follow us, all the links and descriptions below. Fast approaching our 10,000 subscribers, so a great time to get involved, because we have got an amazing prize coming up. But anyway, all those links and descriptions and details are below. So let's jump in and let's start off with the big man, the Exocrine, start things going. Exocrine's a unit I love. I loved at the start of 8th edition. He then went away quite a lot, and he's come back with a vengeance at the beginning of 9th edition due to the changes in the core rules, and that's synergizing very well with the stratagems and abilities from the Blood of Baal book. So now in a Kronos detachment, we have the ability to make those shots explode on 5s because of his +1 to hit, which is crazy, and the ability to not have to worry about when he does move, he can't hit at all. He's always hitting on 3s, which is really good, really good. So yeah, he is just a super reliable unit. Toughness 8 makes him very resilient, lots of wounds, good save of a 3-up, and ways to buff that to an invulnerable save. He's really good. He's just really good. Strength 7 on his gun is probably your only holdback. If it was Strength 8, he would be off the scale at his points, because now he has got competition from the Barb Turret, but he's still very good. So I very much like the Exocrine. I think he's very useful. Next up, we have the Terran Effects. There are people out there that love Terran Effects. I feel he's had a tough old road recently. The biggest complaint for the Terran Effects has always been his big bad rupture cannon. Really has never been big and never very bad, or quite bad, to be honest. But the acid spray is very good, and very useful, and in quite an aggressive Tyranid list can be useful. Again, that toughness 8 is really strong. 14 wounds is very good, and again, ways to buff him to make him better. I really quite like him, but I just wouldn't really take him in the other 2 ways. Like the Flesh Borer Hives are not great, and the Rupture Cannon is both too expensive and not very good in my opinion. But I'd love to know if you guys use him and find him effective. I would love him too, because I'd love that Rupture Cannon to be really mean. I just don't think it is, to be honest. Anyway, so that's your Terran Effects. Then moving on to the Biovores. Biovores were very cheap to start off 8th edition. They were spam like anything. Obviously rule of 3 and a points increase means you see a little bit less Biovores, but they still have a place in a Tyranid army. They have the ability both to put out mortal wounds, but also to miss and put blocker spore mines in the way, so they can be useful. They're not very expensive. They give you a lot of range, so they're not terrible, and they're pretty small, so I don't dislike Biovores. I think they're okay. Then we have the Toxicrine. The Toxicrine's excuse me, is okay. He does hit extremely hard. He's quite fast, but he's not particularly hard to kill. Doesn't have an invulnerable save, and the reality is, he's just not. He doesn't do enough damage quite oftentimes to really to find his place in the list. And the heavy support is quite heavily. There's a lot of competition for it. so I tend to find he misses out. He's probably one of the only units I've never found a place in my lists for. I must give him a go, but at the moment he finds himself on the sidelines quite a bit. Then we have the Carnifexes. Now, anyone that knows me knows I'm a huge fan of the Carnifexes. Both the Carnifexes, the Screamer Killers, and the Thornbacks. Love these guys. They are such a classic Tyranid unit. Very, you know, they are Tyranids. People think Tyranids, they think Carnifexes. These guys are great. They still look cool. They're very, very small these days, but they're really, really cool. You can take these in units of 3, which is great. So you can actually have quite a lot of them on the table, which I think is super cool, because then they will spread out. They're really quite cool. They're really quite good. The Venom cannon is a great choice to put on them. Heavy Venom cannons are still scary. The points wise, they went up a little bit in points altogether, but not huge amounts. They're still viable. And now the fact that they can't get pinned down in combat, because funny enough, Carnifex is not that great in combat, believe it or not. It's good because they can carry on shooting, which is great. So I really like Carnifexes. I think they're good. I think there's still quite a place for them. They're not quite kind of my auto pick, because I've got other choices now, but I quite like the Carnifexes. I don't think there's so much place for the combat orientated ones. They're okay, but the 4+ weapon skill is not great for something that should be in combat. Even though they get +1 when they charge, even though they get +1 from the one eye, they should hit on 3s in combat, I'm afraid, and they just don't, which is a real problem, which makes them a bit sucky there, but they're still cool. And Thornbacks, yeah, you take the normal Carnifex anyway, because the builds, you just want to take them. Having a -1 to hit is great, and the Sporus and the enhanced senses to make them +1 at shooting is really good as well. So shooty Carnifexes I love. Combat Carnifexes, they're not that great, unfortunately. Then we have the Morlock. Did get a bit of love in the Blood of Baal. The ability to make his Terror from the Deep a little bit more effective is nice, but these guys aren't as good as they used to be, and a lot of the kind of secondary objectives they're not able to do, which is a bit of a shame, but they're just a distraction. They can come in, cause a bit of trouble, and most of the time just get blown away, but they're still cheap and cheerful. They still have a lot of attacks. You can make them better with some of the upgrades from Blood of Baal, so they're not terrible, but again, they're not amazing. Then we have the Trigon and the Trigon Prime. I tried these guys recently, and actually they're okay. And believe it or not, I always thought they're terrible. They still get blown away so quickly, with no vulnerable save, and toughness 6 means that they're just not very resilient. But they do hit quite hard. They're quite a lot of fun to use. They are one of the super coolest models in the Tyranid range, so I wouldn't completely write them off, but they're not great. But with a little buff, they probably don't need much love to be actually really quite good, but probably not at the moment. Okay, so that's the heavy supports, and as I said, I probably should give a bit of a mention to the Barbed Turagil and the Scythe Turagil, because both are great, but particularly the Barbed Turagil, now with his gone from being a super heavy to being a heavy, is now really, really strong. His gun is very, very good. He fights a bit in combat, super tough. Like him a lot. Okay, my nose is itching. Don't know why my nose is itching. Does that mean I'm coming into money? No, that's your hand. I don't know. Anyway, guys, so let's move into the other kind of bits and pieces. I'm going to call it bits and pieces. So we've got the Tyranid. Tyranid, not amazing. It's a way to actually leverage quite a lot of Venom cannons, but they don't hit particularly well. And with the ability to now, you know, reserve your guys easier, I find them quite a hard choice to probably take. I don't really know much more to say about them. I actually brought one to Vegas the year before last. I found them with a kind of tactic to kind of bring him in, get him to re-roll the hits on the guns with the psychic power. it's a bit gimmicky. Doesn't really work that well. It's still a monster. It still hits quite hard, but not hard enough. Then we have the Harpy and the Hive Crone. I want these guys to work, and I'm going to kind of reserve judgment because I think there's play somewhere within these units. I think the problem is they're very, very soft, and I'm not sure whether their points really quite add up. But just that super ability to be just so quick and hit okay. Harpy with a bit more shooting, the Hive Crone a bit more combat. I think there's something with these guys. I just need to play with them, and I need to get some board time with them. But I think they're ones to look out for. They probably don't need much help to be really quite good, but at the moment they just die too easily, and they're probably just too many points for that easy kill. But I don't know. I think there's play there somewhere. I haven't found it yet, but I think there's play in those units. And then we'll finish off with the Sporocyte. Sporocyte's amazing. Just such a good unit now. Obviously, it's a fortification, so you need to take that detachment. But what it gives you is an ability to block out your opponent. Gives you ability to create spore mines. Again, it can have a bit of kick from the guns you put on it. I really like it. It's quite cheap. Just a very, very good unit. One of the better units that we have access to. Real hidden gem. Did a video on it, and that was also around the meiotic spores. They got quite a big nerf. The Sporocyte now really stands out as kind of our infiltrating nuisance unit in the Codex. So I think this fits in quite a lot of competitive lists. Really like it. So that's the heavy support and the bits and pieces. Let's just talk really briefly about the Hive fleets. I'm not going to go through all the stratagems, but I will talk about the Hive fleets in a bit of detail. Again, for veteran players, this won't necessarily be helpful, but for you new players, this might be useful. And I'm not going to talk about the build your own ones. I don't think there's much play there, if I'm being brutally honest. But I'd love to know if you're using build your own ones. Let me know. Maybe I'll give them a go. So we've got Behemoth. I really like Behemoth now. And didn't like them before. But if you are going to play things like Swarm Lord, you're going to play things like the Demicheron. I find they're really quite good. That re-rolling charge is incredibly strong. You team that up with Adrenal Glands, and actually it's great. But you do need to play quite an aggressive combat army to make that count and to make it viable against some of the other kind of more standout ones. I quite like it. Kraken is obviously the go-to for a lot of people. Gives you a lot of movement shenanigans, both stratagems good. Gives you the ability to break out of combat recharge. Love that. It's great. It's just speedy Hive fleet. I don't think it's quite as good as it used to be. I think Gene Stealer is where the strength really was. And actually, I'll argue that maybe I think the Behemoth is probably better combat-wise. Personally. But a lot of pros, I say pros, but a lot of the really good players rate Kraken above it. So there you go. It's personal preference. Leviathan is your all balance. So like if you want to build like a list with a bit of everything, Leviathan generally benefits everything because it gives you that kind of 6+ after save kind of on everything, which kind of just mounts up to being extra wounds. Obviously you have to be within range of a Synapse creature, but it's really useful. It's quite good for Horde builds. So yeah, it's good. And then we've got Gorgon, rerolls, ones to roll in the fight phase. It's just not as good as Kraken or Behemoth, really. And then you've got Yomongundo, which I used to love, and it's still probably my favourite, giving you the advantages of cover all the time, unless you charge or run. I really like that. That particularly on monsters, giving you kind of a 2-up save all the time almost on your monsters is really good. You've got Hydra, which is all around little bugs, because you can reroll hits and fight rolls. If you have if the unit that you're fighting has fewer models, so I don't really like it. I think it's probably the weakest. But again, if you're using it to much effect, then let us know. And then probably by far the strongest, because Tyranids at the moment, they continue to be probably more of a shooting army than a combat army on the whole, is Kronos. That rerolling ones to hit in shooting when you stand still is phenomenally powerful for the shooting bugs, and makes it really, really competitive. Team that up with some of the best psychic abilities, best stratagems. It's really good, really, really good. So Kronos tends to be where to go. And that is the roundup of the book. Now, we haven't talked about stratagems, and I'm not going to, but hopefully this is really, really useful for you. And if you have any questions, then do chuck them down in the description below. I will try my best to answer them. And if I get enough, I may even do another Q&A video for you guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have, please do drop a comment and give us a big old like. And until the next video, I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.